Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of BSing Sports, a part of the BSing Network, where we do a little bit of BS and we talk a whole lot of sports. Um, as you can see, today with me is Ryan, as always. Hello,
Hey,
Ryan. How are you? How are you?
I'm okay. I had a good day today. Not much to talk about other than, some NFL stuff. We got some pretty important and good topics that we need to cover for sure. A lot of big questions that need to be answered after this past week's NFL action.
Yeah, I would concur with that. So first, let's just jump right into it, right? So you got Week 13 recap that we're doing here. For those of you keeping track, Tim goes 12-3-1 because obviously the Commanders and Giants tie. I go 13-2-1, and Ryan also goes 12-3-1. But that's also because Sunday Night Football counts as 2 wins, as we've discussed in previous weeks. Sunday Night Football, when we get it right, it counts 2 wins. We all got Sunday. We all took the Cowboys. So our total standings on the season, where we sit, is Tim is at 119, 82 and 2. Ryan is at 122, 78 and 2. And I'm sitting at 127, 72 and 2. So Timmy's looking like he's going to end up buying some merchandise. Sorry, you can't defend yourself, Tim.
Yeah, for right now,
so
it's still early, and we did all verbally agree that this runs through the playoffs. So we got some time. Definitely have some time for him to come back and for me to take over that first place spot as well.
Yeah, all right. So let's get into it. Week 13 recap. Steelers defeat the Falcons 19-16. The biggest question that we have, we're just gonna bring it up here. Is it Desmond Ridder time? Is it Ridder time with the Falcons going on bye and the Bucs finally in first place? Ryan.
I think it has to be. The Falcons are sitting at 5-8. The Bucs did just get their record back to 500. The Falcons are coming on by week 14. I think if you were ever going to figure out what you have in a young quarterback, now is the time to do that. Give him the bye week for an extra week of preparation. And then you use the last 3 games of the season to analyze, are you the Falcons drafting a quarterback with your first round pick, or are you looking to do something else? Because if you need to draft a quarterback, if Desmond Ridder really is not the answer for your franchise, then you need to find that out now. Because if you don't, and you just go into next year with him being potentially bad, then you have more questions than you have answers once again for the Atlanta Falcons. So I think that now is the perfect time to go ahead and get Desmond Ridder some snaps.
Yeah, I think everybody across the league can agree that Marcus Mariota is not the answer there. You're talking this season, he's got 61.3 completion percentage, 2,200 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I know that he's run for 435 yards and 4 touchdowns, but I don't have the stat in front of me, but I think he's got 8 total fumbles, 4 fumbles lost on the season. So you're talking he's got 19-13 touchdown to intercept or turnover ratio, which isn't really that good. And I agree with you. Now's the time. If you are concerned that you need to draft a quarterback in the beginning of the draft next year, you need to know what you've got in the kid that you drafted in the second round this year. And I mean, look, Ridder looked really good in college, but it doesn't always translate to the NFL. Look at Marcus Mariota, point in case, right? Like,
yeah, sure.
So you need to know. Like, you absolutely need to know. So I agree. I think it's also time to go to Desmond Ridder, bring him in this week, tell him, hey, you're the starter for the rest of the season. Get 2 full weeks, 12 full days, 11 full days of practice where he's taking reps with the ones, and then throw him out there after the bye week. Yes, absolutely. For me, it is Ridder time.
It's mind-blowing to think that Chip Kelly, when he took GM privileges away from Howie Roseman way back in the day, almost traded 3 first-round picks and LaShawn McCoy to draft Marcus Mariota. I mean, he ended up, semi-destroying that franchise anyway, but that would have really, decimated the Eagles for a long time.
Yeah, it absolutely would have. You're right. It ended up being something that worked out for us in the long run, because the way it didn't work is he didn't draft Mariota. We trade Foles away. Foles comes back. The whole story, the whole Super Bowl. Eagles fans, you know about it. Next game is the Packers go to Chicago and beat the Bears 28-19. So the question we have here is, how worried are we about Fields' ability to throw the ball on a 1 to 10 scale? Keep in mind that his injury was not to his throwing shoulder. Scale of 1 to 10.
I think from a long-term perspective, I'm probably sitting at about a 6. It is possible that you can improve as a passer. Jalen Hurts did it, who was obviously, viewed in the same profile as Justin Fields in the sense that, they like to tuck and run after the first read. However, obviously Hurts made the progressions. Allen Josh Allen has made the progression. So it's possible. However, there is that Ohio State quarterback, thing kind of floating around where it's like, they really don't show up in the NFL. So to me, this all really comes down to how well Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, how well Matt Eberflus, how much time that they invest, and how much help they give Justin Fields too, because Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool are not number one receivers. They're barely number two receivers on good NFL teams. So they have to get him some help. But at the same time, Fields mechanically, this is the third time where we've seen them within striking distance of a game. Justin Fields, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this past week. I know he went 20 for 25, but when it mattered, you can't put any points on the board and you turn the football over twice through the air. It's not a good look to continuously do that. But he is young, does have time to improve, so I'm going to say a 6.
All right, I'm actually closer to a 7, and it's got nothing to do with the Ohio State thing. It's just, as you know, and I've said it several times on the show, I haven't been a real big fan of Justin Fields, and he continues to show why I haven't been a fan of him. Yes, he had a few breakout games where he rushed like a maniac earlier in the year, and I kind of stepped off on the criticism, and I kind of stepped off on being critical of him. But I'm going back on the offense here. He's got a 61% completion percentage for the season, 61.7. He's thrown for 1,800 yards, close to 1,900 yards, 7.5 yards per reception, but a 13 to 10 touchdown interception ratio. That is not good. It means he's making terrible reads. He's turning the ball over. And as you already pointed out, you're turning the ball over in critical situations. They had the Packers beat this week. They did. And turnovers, and then really good play scheming from Christian Watson turned the game in the Packers' favor. But they had the Packers beat, and Justin Fields turns the ball over twice. I'm at about a 7. Do I think he can make the improvement? As you already pointed out, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, these guys made the improvement. They got better at passing because they knew they needed to. I just don't think he's that type of quarterback, and I don't think he ever will be. So no, I'm closer to a 7 on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's shown great ability with his legs, so now we do have to see the improvement on his arm. But he's definitely done well enough overall that he's earned another shot to be the Chicago Bears quarterback in 2023, obviously.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes, he definitely deserves a shot to be the starter next year. And if he makes the progression, then great. I just don't think it's going to happen. Going on to the blowout that was the Jaguars visiting the Lions, 14 Jaguars, 40 Lions.
This Lions was not how I predicted these teams to clear the over-under in any way.
Neither of us.
No.
So, I mean, again, the Lions put up 40 here. Jacksonville only puts up 14. The question we have on the docket here today is Jared Goff Detroit's future quarterback?
I've said it a couple times. They are in a tough spot with Jared Goff because they can buy him out for a relatively cheap $10 million dead cap hit this offseason. However, they just have so many problems on the defensive side of the football. So if they do commit to Jared Goff, it's for another 2 years. So you really have to look at his play and be like, can we afford another 2 years of this? I do think that Detroit goes with him, because if they decide to draft a quarterback, right, you're not going to draft a quarterback very early in the first round with the intention that he sits 2 years. You're not going to cut Goff, after a year and he might have some dead cap. The only thing I could see is that they draft a quarterback and maybe they plan on trading Goff, after, one season. But Goff's still young, man. He's not old. He's still in his 20s. Maybe they take a couple drafts to figure out the defensive side of the ball before they go ahead and turn around to a quarterback. I think Goff stays. I think Goff stays next year. I think he's their starting quarterback in 2023. I think that the Lions, have gotten in some of these shootout games and they've performed very well. Like, offense is not the issue in Detroit. So I think Goff stays.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he completes 76% of his passes for 340 yards and 2 touchdowns the other day. On the season, he's got a 65% completion percentage, over 3,000 yards, 19 to 7 touchdown interception ratio. To your point, the offense is not the problem in Detroit.
No.
And listen, Jared Goff right now looks more like a solution than a problem in Detroit.
Who would have
And
thought
who would
that?
have thought we'd be saying that when he was traded over there for Stafford last year? None of us. We all thought that he had his one shot in Detroit and he was going to be done. But what Dan Campbell and that coaching staff is doing for Jared Goff is wonderful and amazing. And like I said, I do believe that he's the quarterback of at least the near future. Like you said, I think for sure Jared Goff is the quarterback of the Lions for the next 2 seasons, for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I would for sure say one season because maybe they do eat the 5 million cap hit and cut him, or maybe they can trade him not this coming off season but the following. But yeah, I mean, Jared, the offense is not the issue in Detroit. They put up points.
Correct. Yeah. So for me, Jared Goff is Detroit's future quarterback, at least for me, the next 2 years. Obviously, they can reassess after that time. Look, they're in the playoff hunt too. They're a game and a half out on the playoff hunt. Like
Yeah,
it's saying something.
yeah, for sure.
Another team in the playoff hunt, only in the AFC. The Jets lose 27-22 to the Vikings in Minnesota. Mike White plays pretty well again. Uh, Pretty simple question that everybody's asking. Is Zach Wilson officially out in New York?
I still think it's more likely Zach Wilson is the starting quarterback in 2023 than Mike White. However, I think the most likely scenario is that they trade Zach Wilson and move on from him and probably retain Mike White as a backup. Draft capital matters so much in the NFL, and they expended great draft capital, number 2 overall pick, to go ahead and get Zach Wilson, whereas Mike White was an undrafted free agent, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot more tied to Zach Wilson than there is Mike White. That's why I do believe that he has a better chance of starting than Mike White. However, I think Zach Wilson's out in New York altogether. I don't think that it really matters. I think that there's going to be so many teams in need of a quarterback. I think that there's going to be, a better veteran quarterback fit for this team that has seemingly blown their rebuild expectations out of the water. So I think that they definitely look to free agency, to maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo, even Derek Carr. Derek Carr has performed better than Zach Wilson has this year. I mean, most quarterbacks have, but teams looking for cheap rookie deals. Maybe the New Orleans Saints, looking to get a young quarterback here.
Yeah.
So there's some options, there's some flexibility, but I do think Zach Wilson is out in New York. It's really hard to save a relationship after you bench a number 2 overall pick and then bring him back next year and expect everything to be happy and dandy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, the biggest thing is how well the team is playing around Robert Saleh, however you say his name, the coach. If he were not coaching as well as he was, and the team didn't rally around him as an individual, I would say that Zach Wilson probably has a shot to be the Jet starter next year. That's not the case. Robert Saleh, again, can't pronounce his last name, is coaching really well there for New York. I mean, they take the 9-2 Vikings to within a touchdown in a game in Minnesota. They're playing really well. The defense is playing well. The offense is playing pretty well. And it's with Mike White on the field. So listen, for his career, Zach Wilson's career, 55% completion percentage. It actually went down this year from last year, 0.2 points, but still 55%. 3,600 yards, 13-16 touchdown to interception ratio. That's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. And look, we can draw it up and say it's scheme, however they're utilizing him isn't right, because I'm a huge fan of that argument. And that might be the case, and it might be the case where he goes to a new team and he gets another opportunity to start. But I do also believe Zach Wilson is out in New York for the simple fact that he isn't performing. Let's forget about the relationship and everything else. He's not playing well. So I agree.
Be thankful Tim's not here, because damn well he would take every opportunity to say, but Mike White's playing great in this scheme.
Which would prove my point. Just like if Tyler Huntley plays great in Baltimore and Lamar Jackson hasn't this season, it's about the scheme, not the player.
Well, that's a bit of a different scenario, because Tyler Huntley is literally a poor man's Lamar Jackson. He does all the same things. He's a tuck and run first read guy. He's just not nearly as good of a passer as Lamar Jackson.
We'll get into that conversation.
But as far as the Jets go, I think just Mike White's playing better. Look, I don't think that Zach Wilson, was a bad prospect coming out of college. I still think there's time for him to turn his career around. Ultimately, when you look at the trend throughout history, even Josh Allen didn't become the Josh Allen that we know today until his 3rd year in the NFL. So, I mean, Zach Wilson hasn't even hit that point yet. Maybe he goes, changes scenery, grows into a better quarterback. There's still time for him. So I'm not going to say that Zach Wilson's like officially out of the league. He's backup material. He can't do it. I'm just saying, not a great start in New York. Time to move on. Go get a change of scenery.
Yeah. let's keep in mind, New York is one of those huge markets, right? When you're not playing well, they let you know you're not playing well.
Especially when the Jets have played, like as a team, played as well as they have this year, and again, blown their rebuild expectations out of the water. So now you look at the one guy who's been a bit of an issue, and it's like,
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, again, both of us say he's out in New York, but not necessarily out of the NFL. Let's see. The Giants and the Commanders tie at 20 in New York in the Meadowlands. Look, we know the Commanders have been playing well. They're not in a playoff spot right now. They just fell below the Seahawks because it was a tie. Is the Giants Cinderella story done? Are they a playoff team?
no, I don't think so. I actually think that the Commanders are going to beat them after their bye week in week 15. So I think that the Commanders will firmly take hold of third place in the NFC East, which is crazy to say. I think that the Commanders have just been playing better football. They're 5-1-1 over their last 7 games. I think that they can very well steal that game. And the Giants are reeling. They're 1-3-1 in their last 5 games. They just don't look like the team that had that Cinderella magic, as you talked about early in the season. That and the other team we'll talk about later, Seattle. They have a very favorable schedule. Again, we'll get into Seattle a little bit later, but it doesn't look good for New York. They've got to play Philadelphia. They've got to play a Washington team that they just tied at home. So now they have to go to DC and try and beat them. They're fighting for their lives. They have to win out essentially in order to be a playoff team. I don't think they are. I don't think that the Giants are a playoff team.
Yeah, so here's the thing for me. In the Giants wins this season, Saquon Barkley has just touches. Let's forget the yards, touches. 18, 21, 31, 13. Granted, that one's down. 22, 24, and 35 in their wins. Their losses, 14, 15, 11, 18. That one's a little higher. I get that. When teams shut down Saquon Barkley, they are absolutely nothing. And it took, for whatever reason, 8 weeks for the NFL to realize, hey, we should really stop Saquon Barkley, and the Giants can't beat us. And that's what we're seeing. Like you said, 1-3-1 in their last 5 games. Defenses are finding coaching schemes, and defenses are finding ways to stop Saquon Barkley. And as good as Saquon Barkley is, and let's not act like he is not, as good as he is and as impactful as he can be on a game, which he showed in the first 8 weeks of the season, he hasn't been able to do that. And look, proof is in the pudding, right? 1-3-1 in their last 5 games. No, I also do not believe the Giants make the playoffs. I agree with you 100%. They go to Washington and lose, and Washington takes that spot from them. And then, again, I've already mentioned that the Lions are a fringe playoff team. The Seahawks right now are a playoff team with a favorable schedule. We'll get into that. So, no, for me, the Giants are the worst of those 9 teams that are, potential or are playoff teams, and then the ones trying to get in. I believe the Giants are the 9th best team in that lineup. So, no. They do not make the playoffs.
Giants are another team that proves Tim's point more than yours. Daboll's a great coach. He's had fantastic schemes. They just suck at the skill positions. Like let's be as frank about it as we can.
Wide receivers.
Yeah, their wide receivers are not good. Daniel Bellinger's a rookie, and rookie tight ends very rarely make an impact. And they're getting the best that they can out of Daniel Jones. But if this is the best that Daniel Jones can give us, then he's not a top half NFL quarterback.
There's a reason they didn't pick up his 5th-year option.
Yeah.
He's showing the reason they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, and it's that simple. When the game is in his hands, they've got no shot.
And again, but I agree with that point. However, we do have to, give him the benefit of the doubt that the wide receiver core in New York is awful.
That's fair.
They're the worst in the league. I would argue that the New York Giants have the worst receiving core in the NFL.
Man, that Texans receiving core.
They've
gotten better. They've gotten better.
Yeah, Nico Collins over anybody in New York.
That's fair. Okay. I like that. I do like that. And you're right. We need to give Daniel Jones the benefit of the doubt in those scenarios. But for me, and I believe this very much, if the football is in Daniel Jones's hands, I don't think that they are going to win the game.
I agree with that statement. I do. I'm just saying, we can't be like Daniel Jones is we can't be like Zach Wilson and Daniel Jones. We have to, kind of throw out there that, hey, their receivers suck.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, next one. And we're going to like this conversation. The Titans go to Philadelphia and lose 35-10. This afternoon, the Titans fire their GM. Here's the big question that I think we both want to answer ecstatically. Did the Titans GM get fired because of the production AJ Brown is having in Philadelphia?
Hell no. No. No, I think, as much as Eagles fans would love to look into the timing, and the timing is a little weird. You could make the argument that this is the straw that broke the camel's back. However, the Titans have been in NFL purgatory for the last few years now. We've sat up here and said that the Titans are a good football team, that they're a sleeper football team. And I agree with that. However, they're not a Super Bowl contending team. They're in a division that's bad, so they benefit from that. However, they're not necessarily in that top tier teams that the AFC has. They're not with Kansas City. They're not with Cincinnati, seeing as they both lost to both of those teams this year. So when you take a step back at that, it's like, we're never really going to be competing, but we're never going to be bad enough to have good draft capital. What do you do? So yeah, I think it was the right move to fire their GM. The timing of it is a little weird because the Titans are presumably going to win their division, so you don't really ever see this. This is a little unprecedented. However, it's not about A.J. Brown. It's not just about A.J. Brown. The Titans have had a lot of, issues that were going to develop into long-term problems in the sense that they were never going to be good enough to be a Super Bowl contender, never bad enough to, do something, be in a full rebuild mode. So I think that's kind of more so why the GM got fired. As much as we would love to sit here and say it's because, we robbed him of A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown didn't want to be a Titan anyway. The Titans were, in part to their GM, weren't going to give him the money that he deserved. So he didn't want to be a Titan anyway. I think that they made the right move trading him.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you. I kind of like sneakily asked that question to begin it because I thought you were going to go the other way on it, but I'm right there with you. You don't fire a GM because of one player's situation. You just don't. Yes, AJ Brown is having a phenomenal season in Philadelphia. I have his stats pulled up right here. Let's see.
He went 8 for 119 and 2 touchdowns against the Titans. So talk about a revenge game.
He did. On the year, he's got 61 receptions for 950 yards, 15 yards per catch, 9 touchdowns, and 2 fumbles, and they just happen to be lost, like whatever. Yes, he's having a great season in Philadelphia. Part of that is in due to how much better Jalen Hurts has looked. Like, obviously, A.J. Brown can't throw the ball to himself, A. B, do I think Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback now than Ryan Tannehill? I do. And it's just a better situation for A.J. Brown. Now, going back to the GM situation, I'm right there. What are the Titans supposed to do, right? So the GM has not drafted poorly. They've got good offensive linemen they've been bringing in. They've got good corners and safeties they've been bringing in. He hasn't been doing a terrible job, but because they're still not bringing in the talent that gets them to that next level, the level that you talked about, the Bengals, Bills, Chiefs, you start to look around at what can be done. And if the GM isn't making the necessary additions, that's who's got to go, because you're not going to fire Mike Vrabel.
No, just not. Mike Vrabel has, turned that team, definitely squeezed every drop of talent that they have. I think that this is the result of what's going to continue to be a longstanding problem in the NFL. When you look at the quarterbacks around the league, you wonder why Kirk Cousins keeps getting extensions. You wonder how Derek Carr got his extension. You wonder why Ryan Tannehill got his extension. And it's the result of not every quarterback on the face of the earth is going to be Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and dudes that, are going to elevate your team to the next level like those superstar players are. So you end up with a Kirk Cousins who is good enough. You end up with Derek Carr, who's good enough to start. You end up with Ryan Tannehill, who's good enough to start. I think that, they're sticking with Ryan Tannehill might have been more of an issue than the A.J. Brown thing. I think, the Titans GM kind of realized, like, hey, Ryan Tannehill's probably the best that we're going to get right now. In the grand scheme of things, he's right. But in business, when you're trying to win a Super Bowl, that's not going to cut it. Like, you have to take the risk to go out and find the next, Josh Allen, the next Patrick Mahomes. And Malik Willis clearly doesn't look like either of those two guys. I mean, granted, we talk about giving people time, but like Allen and Mahomes were not nearly that bad. their first, few starts. Oh man, like Malik Willis looks terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in training camp there were like grumbles that Tannehill wasn't going to keep the starting job there, that Willis might come in and take it if there were any time where the Titans might be struggling. And then he played in the preseason, and Vrabel flat out was like, no, just no. Honestly, I think the Willis draft pick had more to do with the firing of the GM than AJ Brown's trade.
I would say at worst it's equal playing field, but I do agree. I think that the Malik Willis draft pick probably weighs a little bit heavier because in the world of the NFL, the quarterback means more than one wide receiver. Treylon Burks doesn't look bad when he plays. He actually looks like a pretty explosive dude. So
Yeah,
now, when you talk about a guy who's stealing is AJ Brown and you just let a guy go, you let AJ Brown go for a guy who might be AJ Brown. That's a little different. However, Treylon Burks does not look like a bad player. He looks like a dude that can ball when he's given, the opportunity and when he's healthy. So I do think that the Malik Willis pick probably had more to do with it than the AJ Brown thing.
I would agree with that. All right, let's Browns go to Houston and win 27-14, more because of a defensive effort than oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped a game. Let's go back. Broncos are actually, I think they were in Denver, weren't they? No, they were in Baltimore.
No, it was. Hold on, wait. I can check because I did on the doc.
You did. Okay, I wanted to make sure that was accurate. Yeah, Broncos lose to the Ravens 10-9. Tyler Huntley runs in for the game-winning touchdown there late for the Ravens. So the obvious question here, with Lamar Jackson being out 1 to 3 weeks with a sprained knee, it looks like. How concerned are you about the Lamarless Ravens going down the stretch?
Very. At this point, I'm going to start making our predictions based on the fact that I'm giving up a game. Because we do have that Titans or Bengals thing at this point. I'm going to assume that the Bengals are going to finish higher than the Titans because I do think the Bengals will win the division. This is massive, especially this week because this is a divisional game. They do play the Pittsburgh Steelers coming up, so this is a must-have game. I think as far as their playoff chances go, when you look around at the rest of the AFC, particularly your neighbors to the east, and you see how well that they're doing, you see the Patriots have crept back up into the playoff conversation. You see that New York, you see Buffalo, you see Miami, that division's a juggernaut, And then you look at yourself and you're like, we still have to play the Bengals one more time, I believe.
They do.
Yeah, they play in week 18. So
that's correct.
When you're the Ravens, you're looking at this like you better hope that this is a one game out for Lamar Jackson because maybe you can sneak by Pittsburgh with Tyler Huntley, who, as we touched on earlier, profiles as the same type of, Lamar Jackson type runner. However, he's not anywhere near the same thrower. You desperately need Lamar Jackson back in an offense that's just absolutely decimated with injuries at the skill position. Mark Andrews has missed multiple games. Rashad Bateman, who is expected to be your number one, is out for the season with a foot injury. J.K. Dobbins was expected to take most of the running back work. He's been out for multiple games this year, might be coming back this week. You look at Gus Edwards, who was supposed to be the backup running back and has played very well in that offense in his career, missed multiple games this year. They are just decimated at the skill position. They're not deep enough at the skill position. So now you have to look at Lamar and ask him to do just enough. Fortunately for the Ravens, their defense has played extraordinary the last 4 weeks. I think they've allowed more than 13 points one time. So that's their saving grace. If the young defense can continue to play at that level, it might save them while Lamar's out. But I am highly, highly concerned about the Ravens if he misses, 2 or even 3 weeks.
With Lamar missing more, let's say hypothetically he misses 2 weeks, right? Let's cut it right down the middle because we're saying 1 to 3. Let's say he only misses 2 weeks. He comes back in that third week. They need to split just to stay on pace with the Bengals. They're going to need to split because the Bengals are playing. We'll get into it, I know, but the Bengals are playing really well right now. 8-2 in their last 10, I believe they are. So you need to at least split with Tyler Huntley running that offense. If Lamar's only out 2 games. He looked real bad coming off the field. I don't think he's only out 2 games. I think he probably misses all 3, and I'd be surprised if he comes back this season, especially if they don't make the playoffs. As you pointed out, the East has all those juggernauts. We may have seen, and I mean it when I say this, we may have seen Lamar Jackson play his last game as a Raven. So, yes, I am very concerned about the Lamarless Ravens. And that's the reality of it. That's the reality of the situation. Let's move on to the next one.
We have a fan question here. Think
Tim
it's time
Hawkins.
for a change in Baltimore, meaning move on from Harbaugh? No. The Ravens are still in playoff contention. John Harbaugh has that team playing great with what he has, which was a young defense that looked horrible in the first 6 weeks of the season. He has them playing well, way above expectations. And now he's putting together a patchwork offense on the field. If anything, I wouldn't be shocked if they fire offensive coordinator Greg Roman in the offseason. I think for the last couple of years, his offense has been very stagnant, very predictable. And if they're going to make a change, that's the one they're going to make. But I think Harbaugh's pretty safe there, at least going into next season.
Yeah, so I know that we say sometimes it's just time to say goodbye to coaches. We talk about it with Mike Tomlin a lot and how it went down the same way in Philadelphia with Big Red. But I agree with Ryan here. I think that Harbaugh, because of the situation that he's in, obviously they're in a position to possibly make the playoffs. I think even without them making the playoffs, because again, if Lamar's hurt, they don't make the playoffs. Can't really hold Harbaugh 100%, accountable for that type of situation. I also think that Harbaugh is safe for next season, and I also think that Greg Roman is out. But part of this is Lamar Jackson's fault. Like we can't take blame away from Lamar Jackson. He didn't get his contract. He's looked extremely lethargic through most of the season. And Timmy said this in a group that we're in earlier. Like, well, Jackson's not following the game plan and he's making his own decisions. How can coaching stop that? You're right. They can't, because that's on a player who doesn't want to be there anymore. And it's unfortunate because the team is good. They had an opportunity to. I think they're on the same level with the Titans. They're not as good as the Bills. They're not as good as the Chiefs. They're not as good as the Bengals. But they're like on that level with the Titans, where if you get in, you never know what happens. You just got to get in, right? So I think Harbaugh's in a better position than Tomlin is in that argument. So I think Harbaugh's safe.
I don't even agree with all of that notion. I agree with the fact that they're in the same tier as the Titans. I'll agree with that. However, I don't necessarily agree with that notion that Lamar's gone off and done whatever he wanted. Who else do they have on that offense that can make a play for them? DeMarcus Robinson? Who's he been in his career? Devin Duvernay? Young, unproven. It wasn't really a great prospect coming out of Texas. Gus Edwards? I mean, he's good for, 10 carries, 45 yards, maybe he gets you a goal line touchdown. Like there are no dynamic playmakers on that offense outside of Mark Andrews. And similar to the Giants with Saquon Barkley, if you can find a way to blanket Mark Andrews, who's had some drop problems this year, by the way, you can stop the Ravens offense. There's no Rashad Bateman to take the top off of a defense. There's no J.K. Dobbins, who was getting 6 yards a carry his rookie season. There's just nobody on the offense. What is Lamar Jackson supposed to do? So it's just a messy situation in Baltimore right now. The offense, they're just decimated by injuries, and it's kind of hard to judge anybody. I do think Lamar Jackson's gone in the offseason, but that's an offseason type question.
Yeah. All right. So you heard it here. Now let's get into that Browns-Texans game. Browns go to Houston, win 27-14. Like I said, 2 defensive touchdowns and a kick return for a touchdown. So you're talking 21 points right there. So technically the Browns offense loses to the Texans defense. And Deshaun Watson threw his first pass to a Texan in 2 seasons because it was intercepted. That was a good joke. So let's do it. Let's grade Watson's performance. I don't have his stats pulled up in front of me, but I got him.
He went 12 for 22, 131 yards, comes out to 6 yards an attempt. No touchdowns, 1 interception. Only took 1 sack for a loss of 1 yard, so I guess that's good. QBR of 28.5 with a passer rating of 53.4. This went exactly the way that I thought it would, and exactly how I've been saying it's going to go forever. Look, Deshaun Watson could turn around and throw for 350 yards next week. I'm not saying he's not a talented quarterback. Dude hasn't played football in 700 days. If you expected him to come out here and be that same level talented quarterback, if you have that expectation that he was going to do that, you were failing yourself from the start. Deshaun Watson's got a lot of rust that he's got to shake off before we can consider him. He's not going to look the same probably the rest of the season, if we're being honest here. So I do not have the expectation that he is going to perform so much better than he did this game. I do expect game-to-game improvements because he is a good quarterback, but he's not going to be, what we saw from Deshaun Watson 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you really took everything in that comment. We talked about it last week. We've talked about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. It hasn't just been like the last week. When Deshaun Watson comes back, don't expect him to like blow the top off of defenses. We had been on top of that from the get go, and he came out and he looked rusty. He missed some pretty open receivers. Great, he didn't take that many sacks. He only took the one sack, and it was more on a scramble that he just didn't get out of the backfield on. I do remember the play. But when he threw that interception, I'm not entirely sure what he was looking at because he threw it directly at the linebacker.
Yeah, Amari Cooper was double covered in the end zone. He must not have seen the linebacker underneath. But yeah, it was not a good decision, not a good throw. It wasn't
bad all around.
Yeah,
I mean, if I got to put a 1 to 10 on his performance here, I'm giving him an absolute 1. The defense bailed him out. Defensive bailed and special teams bailed him out of going home to Texas or Houston and losing. So I was not impressed with Deshaun Watson. And as Ryan already alluded to it. He could come out next week and throw 350 yards. Like, we don't know what he's going to do. But that was exactly what I expected to see as well. It was an extremely rusty, hadn't played for 2 seasons, wasn't really up to game speed Deshaun Watson, and we got it.
Yeah. If we removed context from both situations, if Zach Wilson put up this stat line, people would just absolutely be screaming. So, like I said, if we removed context.
All right, I'm looking while I'm getting the next question. So the next game we have is the Seahawks. I believe, Seahawks at the Rams win 27-23. Can Seattle hold that last playoff spot? I'm actually looking at the Niners' remaining schedule so I can have a conversation ready. I mean, it's pretty simple. We know who the Seahawks play, right? They've got Carolina, San Francisco. They're at Kansas City. Then they get the Jets and the Rams. So do you think Seattle holds that last playoff spot?
I mean, there's 3 very losable games on there. We're going to get into San Fran in a minute, but San Francisco, it's in Seattle, though. On the road at Kansas City, I'm not expecting them to win that game. I don't think hardly anybody is. And then the New York Jets on the road, which could be an interesting matchup for them. So there's 3 very losable games. However, ultimately, I do think that they win one of those San Fran or New York games at home. So I think finishing 3-2 is pretty solid for them. I think they do. I think that they, as I touched on earlier, I think the Commanders and the Seahawks kind of slide into those last 2 playoff spots. More in part to the fact that the Giants do have a really hard schedule coming up, and they just have not looked nearly as good. Whereas Seattle's, had kind of an up game and then a little bit of a down game. I mean, the Giants are just kind of like going through the floor here. So I think that Seattle can hold that last playoff spot, but it's going to be tough. Yeah, we're looking at Carolina at home and the Rams at home. That you expect them to win those games. The other 3, kind of a toss up.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. If they can find a way to go 3-2 in that 5-game stretch there, I think it's easy to say with 10 wins they hold on to that last spot. I think the Commanders get above them. No, because I think the Commanders end up with 10 wins too. So technically, I think the Seahawks hold the 6th spot because I think the Commanders are also going to win 10 games, but because it's about winning percentage or something like that, or however
then
it breaks down.
The Commanders would have the 6th spot because they don't have 7 losses. They'd have a tie.
That's right. By the end of the season. That's correct. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're right. That's my fault. Math is hard. I'm sorry. Numbers are hard. So I've got the Commanders finishing in 6th. I've got the Seahawks finishing as the 7th seed. Look, we can talk about the playoffs all you want. Let's really just break it down to part of the reason they're being so successful. The defense is playing well. DK Metcalf is playing out of his mind, but more importantly, Geno Smith is playing out of his mind. I've never seen this form of Geno Smith. This is the best he's looked his entire career. Pete Carroll might be onto something because you look at what Geno Smith is doing in Seattle right now versus what Russell Wilson's doing in Denver, and you really got to start to wonder. Actually, I think we're well past starting to wonder. You really got to start to say blatantly, like, Pete Carroll was the reason Russell Wilson was so successful. And until Russell Wilson shows us something else, I'm going to agree with it because look what he's doing with Geno Smith.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's an excellent point that you're making there. I do think that Russell Wilson is a much better quarterback than how he's played? That's a great question. The comments right there. That was my follow-up question to you, Bill. What is Seattle doing with their quarterback position? You know, same thing as the Lions. Do the Seahawks, who have the Rams pick, by the way, or no, they don't have the Rams pick. They have whose first round pick do they have? It's a top 5 pick.
Broncos.
They have the Broncos first round pick. Do they go and get a quarterback, or do they stick with Geno?
I think it depends on whether they make the playoffs or not, right? Because Geno hasn't done anything to lose the position. Let's just be honest. He's played well enough to be the starting quarterback in Seattle. And so right here, I'm saying they make the playoffs. So because they make the playoffs, I think they do not go quarterback in this draft. And if they do, I don't believe it's the first round. And then we know how those not first round quarterbacks can turn out. But no, I mean, you're talking a 10-7 Seahawks team gets into the playoffs. I firmly believe Geno Smith is a starting quarterback of that team next year. Now, hear me out. They go 2-3 and they don't make the playoffs, and the Giants somehow squeak in, or the Lions miraculously squeak in. Then I believe Geno's out.
Okay, so that being said, what kind of contract would you expect Geno Smith to get in the offseason? Because mind you, he's only on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. So he is a free agent in the offseason.
I would not give him anything more than a 2-year deal, with the expectation of
32 years old. He is a little bit older than a guy like Goff. So
correct, yeah. So you're giving him a 2-year deal somewhere around I don't know. He got you to the playoffs. Give him, I don't know, $10 million, 2-year, $20 million contract, and see what he can do for you. You know, while he's your guaranteed starter, there's like no questions asked. Geno Smith is our starter for the next 2 years, and see what he can give you. You know what I'm saying? So for me, again, I'm being very specific on this, and I know it's not like an open-ended question and answer here. But if the Seahawks go 2-3 and don't make the playoffs, I believe Geno Smith is out. The Seahawks go 3-2 and make the playoffs, I believe Geno Smith is in.
Yeah, record aside, I think if the Seahawks make the playoffs, I do think that they draft a quarterback anyway. So I disagree with you a little bit there. I think Geno Smith has played well enough to get a contract past what the Seahawks are probably willing to give him at this point. But you never know. There's the quarterback market in the offseason. I can't wait to do an episode on that. It's going to be insane.
Yeah. Quarterback market episode will be insane. Let's see.
So the running back one. The running back one's going to be nuts.
Oh, yeah. We'll have to have an entire episode on just the running backs and where we think they're going.
We'll have to have an episode on, just each individual position probably.
Yeah. Let's see. Where am I? Dolphins, huge game here. Dolphins go to San Francisco and lose 33-17. Jimmy Garoppolo goes out in, I believe, the first quarter, and the 49ers put up 33 points on the Dolphins. I know we have a question on the San Francisco side, and it is San Francisco. Is San Francisco still a Super Bowl contender without Jimmy Garoppolo?
I'm going to be real bold here. I'm going to say yes. I think that they can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy at quarterback. Here's why I say that. I think, well, first off, that the defense in San Fran is incredible. I mean, they have the best defense probably in the NFL. They just had their, second half shutout streak broken this past week, where they allowed, 7 points. I think it was 7 points in the second half, might have been 10. But before that, they had shutouts in 4 straight second half games. So their defense is incredible. Where the benefit comes for Brock Purdy is that this offense is not based around guys that, you're running flies down. It's not the Miami Dolphins offense, where you're constantly pushing the ball down the field with dudes that can open up the defense. It's get the ball into the hands of the playmakers quickly, because these guys can run after the catch. They can make stuff happen with the ball in their hands. You look at George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, all second in yards after catch in their respective positions over the last 3 years. So the offense, Brock Purdy doesn't have to do much other than just get these guys the ball. It's already built on just getting these guys the ball. Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't out here slinging the ball all over the field like he was Patrick Mahomes. He was getting the ball to guys like George Kittle, not so much Kittle. He was getting the ball to Christian McCaffrey. They were getting the ball to Deebo Samuel as best they could. Brandon Ayuk. He was a little bit more of a 5-step drop guy, maybe 3 seconds in the pocket. Brock Purdy can do that. They have a very good offensive line there. So I think this smells a lot like 2017 Philadelphia. I mean, a lot. The whole rest of the team is great. Starting quarterback goes down. Everybody's like, oh, well, but Brock Purdy's set up for some pretty good success here.
Here's what I think needs to be said is Brock Purdy is exactly the type of quarterback that Kyle Shanahan loves to coach. Here is my scheme. Here is the play you're going to run your progressions and hit the guy that's open. Plain and simple, right? I know you talk about it as a coach and like players should be able to execute, and I understand all of that. But Brock Purdy is the type of quarterback that's going to listen to Kyle Shanahan. He's going to, oh, okay, I'm supposed to look at Deebo. If he's not there, look at Christian. If he's not there, get rid of the football. Fine. And he's going to do that. And as such, I mean, look, he threw up 238 yards last week, 2 touchdowns. Listen, their schedule remaining, and this is the reason I brought it up. You get the Buccaneers visiting the 49ers. Then they go on the road to Seattle, which will be a tough game. We already talked about that. The Commanders coming to Washington or to San Francisco will be a tough game. The Raiders, who are playing well, Niners go to the Raiders. And then the Cardinals, I don't really care about the Cardinals. It is a divisional game, so you kind of got to put it on the map there.
Yeah.
Listen, these are 5 games the Niners could potentially lose if their defense wasn't as good as it is. I still got them winning 3 of these games here, which gives them 11 wins, 1 above what I think the Seahawks finish with. So they're still in the playoffs and the 3 seed for me. And because, I mean, whoever comes out of the AFC or NFC South is going to be the 4th seed. And it's just, yes, I still believe the 49ers, depending on the road to the Super Bowl, are still Super Bowl contenders. If the road maintains going through Philly, I think it's a completely different conversation. And I'm not just being a homer when I say that. Philadelphia had 2 bad weeks, and then they turned around and put up 38 points on the Packers and 35 points on the Titans, who are a good team. So I think it's a little bit of a different scenario if the road remains through Philadelphia. But any other team in the playoffs, I think the Niners match up real well, even with Brock Purdy at quarterback.
Yeah, I think that the 49ers fans should not panic. I think everything around Brock Purdy has him set up for success. This is not a guy you have to ask a whole lot of.
All right, so we went from the 49ers angle. I actually wanted to bring one up, and we don't have it on the thing, so I can't actually pull it up. Did the Niners expose Tua Tagovailoa to the rest of the league?
I wouldn't.
They sent 5 on 56% of plays. They sent 5 guys at Tua, and they made sure that they were good stunt plays to put somebody in his area, get his feet happy. And he threw 2 really bad. Well, one was a great play, but 2 really bad interceptions. So I know the Niners defense is fantastic. You think they kind of made a blueprint for stopping the Dolphins offense?
No, I'm going to say no. First off, you could probably stop almost any offense with that scheme. I mean, there are some dudes. You look at Justin Herbert. He's got a career-wise, he's amazing against the blitz. I think his passer rating's over 100, so that's a little bit different. But you look at the talent that the Niners have on defense, it's going to be hard to replicate from another team's perspective what the 49ers were doing to the Dolphins. They did it because they could. And then the second part to that is, at no point were the Dolphins ever in control or even close to being in control of that game. They were constantly down and constantly having to take those shot plays where you have your 5, your 7-step drops. You need a little bit more time. So do I think it was a true blueprint on how to beat the Miami offense? No. But it is worth noting that other teams can mix that in there, and maybe Tua, is deceived by it. Maybe he can't read the stunt blitzes very well. So it's worth noting, but I don't think, when you have an offense with as many explosive weapons as Miami does, it's going to be kind of hard to come up with a certified blueprint to beat that offense.
No, and I'm right there with you. It was a good blueprint, and they executed it to perfection. To Timmy's point, the players executed the good scheme to perfection. But no, I also don't believe that the Dolphins got exposed, or Tua Tagovailoa got exposed in any type of way that he can't rebound from. That's a really good team in Miami, and they're going to rebound from it. So yeah, that's just how I felt about it. It was just a question that I had in my head, and I meant to bring it up to you earlier, but there it is. Let's see. Another good game this week. The Chiefs lose to the Bengals 27-24. So you got two questions on the document, but only one question here in the banners. Let's start with
It's
this
the
one.
same thing. It's the same thing.
So it's a two-part question. Is Joe Burrow working his way into the MVP conversation, and are the Bengals getting right at the hot at the right time?
Well, yes, they are. They are getting hot at the right time.
Yeah, they are.
Beating a team like Kansas City again, which we saw them do in the AFC Championship game last year. It's a huge momentum boost. The Bengals started out 2-0. People kind of had their hands up, like what's going on? With the defending, AFC champions. Were kind of looking
0-2.
around.
They started
like,
out 0-2.
Yeah. Oh, I did say 2-0, didn't I?
Yeah.
Started out 0-2. And now they're 8-2 in their last 10. You touched on that earlier. So they're getting hot at the right time. They're starting to look like the football team that we all thought they could. And welcome back, Jamar Chase. Looks like he hasn't missed a beat. So yeah, I mean, talk about not having mix in the last two games. They were out Chase 4 games, and they still rolled. They still looked like a good team. So they're only going to go as far as the defense can take them, though. We all know that the Bengals' offense is an elite-level offense. However, when you look at the playoff run that they had last year, and you look at the bit of the stretch that they have right now, their defense stepped up in a way that we didn't think that they could, looking at it on paper. So I do think that they're going to go as far as the defense takes them. But, they're getting hot at the right time. And as far as Joe Burrow goes for MVP, I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, let's look at Joe Burrow's stats for the season, right? You're looking at almost 70% completion percentage, 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 103.7 quarterback rating. Those are really, really good numbers. So yes, I do believe he's working himself back into the MVP conversation. However, if guys like Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, continue to do what they've been doing the entire season, I don't see how Burrow can overtake them as MVP. However, I do think that he should get some votes. He does work his way back into the MVP conversation. And yeah, I mean, look, without Joe Burrow, this team doesn't go. It's pretty cut and dry. You put the backup in there, and it's not the same result. And he's made the best of what he's had. Obviously, like you pointed out, Jamar Chase, the best receiver on the team, is out for 4 games. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd find a way to make it happen. You've got Joe Mixon out. Samaji Perine steps up and has a good game this past week. So yes, as a team, they're getting it done, but I do believe that Joe Burrow obviously is like the concrete that keeps everything together. So he worked his way back into the conversation. Does he win it? No.
Took the words right out of my mouth. In the conversation, some astronomical things would have to happen for him to win it.
Yeah, like Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Tua Tagovailoa all getting hurt again. I mean, let's be realistic. Those are 3 guys that are ahead of him in the conversation. But yes, he should be in the conversation. And as for are the Bengals getting hot at the right time? You said it. I said it earlier. 8-2 in their last 10. You don't get that way by not being good. I know that they're still second in their division, but I said it earlier. I think the Bengals overtake the Ravens. They get the 3 seed. And listen, keep in mind, if they tie the Chiefs, or if they get to the same record as the Chiefs and Bills, they've got the tiebreaker on the Chiefs. They could take the 2 seed. It could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. The Chiefs, I believe, have a pretty easy stretch here.
Actually, I think they both have pretty tough schedules. Let me take a look into that real quick. I know the Bengals' schedule is not easy. That's probably the Ravens' only saving grace, and we've touched on it the last couple weeks, but we'll go ahead and review it anyway. So the Bengals' schedule.
Play the Chiefs, or they just played the Chiefs, yeah.
So they're at home against Cleveland. Should win.
Yeah.
They go on the road to Tampa, which is not a gimme. Nobody in their right mind is ever going to count Tom Brady out of a game, despite how bad Tampa's looked. They go on the road to New England. Tough game. At home against Buffalo. Tough game. At home against Baltimore. Not a gimme.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
on the flip side to that, the Chiefs go on the road to Denver, go on the road to Houston, but then they play Seattle at home. Yeah, so okay, the Chiefs do have a bit of an easier schedule because they have Seattle at home, they have Denver at home, and then they go on the road to Vegas. So their toughest game remaining is probably Seattle, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so the Bengals probably don't catch the Chiefs, but I do think they take that spot, the 3 spot over top of the Ravens. And look, you can't discount 8-2 in the last 10, right? You just can't discount it.
Not
Yeah. Let's see. Chargers visiting the Raiders, lose 27-20. Here's a question we've been answering for weeks, but let's just get a definitive statement on it right here, right now. Chargers are currently the 9th seed in the AFC. With this loss, did Brandon Staley seal his fate?
Yep, sure did. Doesn't matter if they make the playoffs or not. I think he's fired.
Correct.
You can't continuously lose to the bottom feeders of your division. You know, the teams that everybody else is laughing at and expect to keep your job even if you make the playoffs. You got that. That's a must win for the Chargers, particularly being in a fringe playoff position. But even if they were, somehow the number 1 seed and they lose that game, you have to win that game. And looking at the way that their season ended last year with that terrible overtime game and taking that time out and, and then losing this game here, I think Brandon Staley about, put the stamp on the envelope that's going to send him out of LA.
I think Brandon Staley is wasting some of the prime of Justin Herbert, and as a result, it cost him his job 100%.
Yep, they're going to have to do something. Herbert's still in the very early years of his career. They're going to make a change quick because they don't want to waste that time.
Correct. We could discuss it in the offseason, who we think the coach is going to be over there, but it's obviously going to be an offensive-minded coach. I've got a couple in mind, but we'll have a show about it.
Yep, sure will.
Colts. Listen, this game, the Colts were losing 20-19 going into the fourth quarter. They lose to the Cowboys 54-19. Pretty simple question, right? Are the Cowboys the biggest threat to the Eagles in the NFC?
We just touched on the 49ers are still Super Bowl contenders. So I do keep them in the conversation. But I think the Jimmy G injury does flip-flop these two teams. I do think that the Cowboys are the bigger threat than the 49ers, who I still think are a bigger threat than the Vikings to the Eagles. The Cowboys have played fantastic football the last pretty much since Dak Prescott came back. Like that ground offense particularly, because Dak Prescott has not played great himself, but he has not had to. The ground offense and the defense has taken this team, to another level. Just having Dak Prescott back has, really elevated this team. Cooper Rush even went, 4-1 while Dak was gone. So the team was already good. They're just playing better now. As an Eagles fan, I hope they've peaked too early. I hope that this is not a sign of things to come. However, when asking if the Bengals have gotten hot at the right time, it's going to be really hard to not ask that same question for the Cowboys. So, yeah, I do think that the Cowboys are the biggest threat to the Eagles in the NFC. Not just the NFC East, the NFC. Week 17 is going to have massive implications to the playoffs.
Christmas Eve, yeah. Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. I believe that the Jimmy Garoppolo injuries flips these two teams in the NFC for me. Look, we know what the Cowboys – look, any team can come out any Sunday and lose. We know it. Are there other teams in the NFL that are more likely to do it than others? Yes. The Cowboys defense has been playing out of their freaking minds. Micah Parsons is looking like first team all pro or all Madden or whatever you want to talk about right now.
All Madden.
Whatever you want to say. I don't even care at this point. And listen, Trayvon Diggs has really upped his game. So he's not the ball hawk that he was last year. However, he's doing more pass deflections and he's not giving up as many big plays. And that's what he needed to improve on. We discussed it at the beginning of the season. He's done better this year. The defense has played out of their minds. And then, as you already talked about, it's a really good offensive line and a really good running attack there. Yes, I believe the Cowboys are the biggest threat to the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC.
It's healthy for football, as much as we are Eagles fans and we ride for our team. There's a different feeling about it when the Cowboys are, your closest competitor. It's like, okay, there's some head nodding going on. There's some smirking that I just did. It's like, hell yeah, brother, let's get it. So I'm a little excited for it in a way. Obviously, I hope that the Eagles do eventually come out on top, but it adds a little fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I'm going to say it here and now because I firmly believe it. These two teams will play each other 3 times this year. I firmly believe it.
Depends on how the playoffs shake out, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys will have to go to Tampa. If the playoffs started right now, the Cowboys would go to Tampa, which I know isn't a gimme. They lost to Tampa earlier in the year. I understand. Then if they win that game, they go to the hypothetically they go to the
if they win that game,
go to the Eagles.
Yeah,
They go to
if
the
they
Eagles.
win that game and no other wild card teams win that game, they're going to Philadelphia.
Yeah. So
going
yeah,
on,
you're talking. I can't see the comments. Hey Tom. But no, I'm saying, and here's why I'm bringing it up is because the Eagles obviously have to go to Dallas on Christmas Eve, and it's really tough to beat a team 3 times in one season. I'm not calling that the Eagles are going to lose on Christmas Eve. That's not what I'm calling. However,
it's preferred if we do face them 3 times a year that they get the loss
They-
out in week 6, Christmas Eve. Then
correct.
I
Yeah,
know
as
where
long as we maintain the 1 seed, I'm inferring that it probably be if we're going to lose 1 time this year to the Cowboys and we play them 3, I'd rather it not be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Goodness, I'd rather it not be in the playoffs.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially if we do beat them twice in the regular season and then lose to them in the playoffs at home, nonetheless.
It's like the Bucs did against the Saints 2 years ago when they made it to the Super Bowl. It's like
San Fran and the Rams in the NFC Championship game last year.
Yeah, exactly. So like it happens. It's tough to beat a team 3 times in one season. So
it's tough to beat a team twice. That's why division matchups are so weird. This is the NFL. This is the highest caliber football players we're watching. Which is another statement that cracks me up because there are the people out there that believe like the University of Georgia would like beat the bottom tier of NFL team. No, they wouldn't. They would get destroyed. No. The Texans, if the Texans and the University of Georgia played 10 times, I would firmly and comfortably say the Texans would win at least 8 of those. Like they're the NFL. Like they're the best players on the earth. Like I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
But
all right, that's all we've got to talk about here today.
Yeah, that's our recap. This is going to be on Spotify here in about an hour. So go ahead, give it a listen for those of you that missed. If you are on Spotify listening to this, thank you, Orphan Rivers, for some fantastic intro music. Thank you to all the people that help us provide a great product. And as always, or not as always, we're doing a new thing here. We got a 3-2 lead, bottom of the 9th. We're going call to the bullpen here. Bringing in the lefty, close out the game. Bill, take us home.
Yeah, so I want you guys all to have a good night. Thanks for joining us here on BSing Sports, part of the BSing Network, where we do a little BS and we talk a whole lot of sports. You have a good night.
It'll be on Spotify, Parker. You can give it a listen.